Do you think Hollywood has outgrown Clint Eastwood? Well, a certain TV host thought so, and he learned the hard way why that was a huge mistake. What was supposed to be a routine interview turned into a public humiliation, leaving the host scrambling for words and the internet cheering for Eastwood. But what exactly happened? What did Clint say that left everyone speechless? And more importantly, why is Hollywood so desperate to silence legends like him? Tonight, we're diving deep into the moment that exposed everything wrong with modern Hollywood, the arrogance, the hypocrisy, and the industry's obsession with rewriting its own history. And trust me, you won't believe how Clint Eastwood shut them down in seconds. Before we get into the shocking details, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications because you do not want to miss stories like this. Hollywood doesn't want you to hear the truth, but we're here to expose it. So, let's get right into it. Clint Eastwood isn't just a Hollywood star, he's a living legend. With a career spanning over 6 decades, the man has redefined what it means to be an actor, director, and cultural icon. He carved his path in an industry that thrives on reinvention, yet Eastwood never bowed to trends or public pressure. From the gunslinging anti-hero of the good, the bad, and the ugly, to the grizzled veteran in Gran Torino, Eastwood has always embodied a level of authenticity rarely seen in modern filmmaking. But here's the kicker. While Hollywood prides itself on evolving, people still turn to Eastwood's classics for real, unfiltered storytelling. Why? Because there's something about his no-nonsense approach that today's movies just can't replicate. But it's not just his roles that made him an icon. His transition from actor to director cemented his place in cinematic history. While most stars fade with age, Eastwood only sharpened his craft. His films like Unforgiven, Million Dollar Baby, and American Sniper proved that you don't need CGI spectacles or franchise overloads to captivate an audience. You just need raw, compelling storytelling. And guess what? Despite being in his 90s, he's still at it. While other filmmakers chase trends, Eastwood continues doing what he does best, telling stories that actually mean something. The question is, why does Hollywood seem so eager to push him aside? Maybe it's because he never played by their rules. Unlike many actors who shapeshift to fit the industry's political climate, Eastwood has always spoken his mind. Whether you agree with him or not, one thing's for sure. He doesn't care about Hollywood's approval. He never has. While modern stars scramble to stay relevant by pandering to audiences, Eastwood remains timeless simply by being himself. That's a rare trait in an industry that thrives on pretense, but this attitude, while admired by fans, has also made him a target. And that brings us to a recent talk show incident that left Hollywood insiders shocked. A smug TV host thought he could put Eastwood in his place, mocking his age, his outdated views, and even suggesting that Hollywood had moved on without him. But here's where things take a turn. Instead of stumbling or getting defensive, Eastwood delivered a response so brutally honest that the entire studio fell silent. And that's where things got really interesting. So, what exactly happened that night? What did Clint say that left this host completely humiliated? And why did the internet explode? With reactions afterward, stick around because you won't believe how this showdown unfolded. It was supposed to be just another late-night interview, light-hearted, scripted, and predictable. But when Clint Eastwood sat across from a smug, fast-talking TV host, things took an unexpected turn. From the start, there was tension in the air. You could see it in the host's demeanor, the subtle smirk, the patronizing tone, the way he leaned in as if ready to challenge a Hollywood giant. The goal was clear: make Eastwood look outdated, irrelevant, a relic of a bygone era. The problem? Clint Eastwood isn't the kind of man you humiliate. The conversation started off casual enough with the usual pleasantries, but within minutes the host's real agenda surfaced. He began steering the conversation toward Eastwood's age, his old-school mindset, and whether or not Hollywood had outgrown him. At first, Eastwood played along, answering with his signature cool, measured tone. But then came the Moment that changed everything. The host leaned in, a smirk creeping across his face, and asked a question so loaded it was practically begging for controversy. With cameras rolling and millions watching, the host fired his shot. Do you think Hollywood has moved past your kind of storytelling? I mean, let's be real, filmmaking has evolved. Don't you think it's time to leave it to the younger generation? The audience reacted with a mix of nervous laughter and murmurs. You could tell they were waiting for Eastwood's reaction. Would he get defensive? Would he try to dodge the question? Would he stumble, giving the host exactly what he wanted? But Clint Eastwood is no ordinary guest. Instead of flinching, he sat back, took a breath, and then he smiled. That's when the energy in the room shifted. The host's confidence wavered for just a second. He knew he had poked the wrong bear, and what came next was nothing short of legendary. So, how did Eastwood respond? Did he shut the host down? In a single sentence, did he flip the script and leave the interviewer scrambling? More importantly, why did this moment go viral, sending shockwaves across Hollywood and social media? Stay with me, because what happened next is something no one saw coming. With a self-satisfied grin, the host leaned in, clearly enjoying the moment. He had set the trap, and now he was waiting for Clint Eastwood to walk right into it. "So, Clint," he began, feigning curiosity, "don't you think Hollywood has outgrown your style of filmmaking? I mean, cinema has evolved. Bigger budgets, more diverse storytelling, advanced technology. Don't you feel like your old-school approach is a bit outdated?" The audience tensed. It wasn't just a question. It was a direct challenge, a veiled insult wrapped in a thin layer of fake politeness. The host wasn't just asking if Eastwood had changed with the times. He was implying that he should have, that the very foundation of what made him an icon was now obsolete. It was a common sentiment in Hollywood circles. The old guard should step aside and make room for the new. But here's the thing. Clint Eastwood has never played by Hollywood's rules. The moment stretched as Eastwood, calm as ever, simply sat there, letting the silence hang in the air. The host, sensing he had the upper hand, chuckled and pressed further. "I mean, come on. Hollywood is about innovation, progress. You still make movies the way they did decades ago. Don't you think audiences want something fresh, something modern?" His tone was laced with condescension, as if he was schooling Eastwood on an industry he had defined. The trap was set, but Eastwood wasn't taking the bait. Instead, he finally spoke, his voice steady, controlled. "Let me ask you something," he said, his gaze locked onto the host. "If Hollywood has evolved so much, why are people still watching my movies?" Boom. The audience erupted. The host, caught off guard, tried to laugh it off, but you could see it. The shift in his demeanor. He had expected to corner Eastwood, but instead he was the one on the defensive, and that was just the beginning. Because Eastwood wasn't done yet. He had more to say, a lot more. And his next words didn't just put the host in his place. They sparked an online firestorm that Hollywood still hasn't recovered from. The room fell silent. The smug grin on the host's face started to fade as Clint Eastwood's words hung in the air. If Hollywood has evolved so much, why are people still watching my movies? It wasn't just a comeback. It was a statement that cut through the noise of modern cinema like a knife. You could feel the shift in the studio. The audience, previously unsure of how to react, now erupted in laughter and applause. The host, clearly rattled, forced a chuckle, trying to regain control of the moment. But Eastwood wasn't done. He leaned forward, his piercing stare locked onto the man across from him. "See, the thing about storytelling," he said, voice steady, "is that it doesn't age. Good stories, well told, will always matter. People don't go back and watch classics because they're outdated. They watch them because they mean something." The audience cheered again, while the host, suddenly looking a little uncomfortable, struggled to find a response. At this point, the host knew he had to save face. "Well, sure, Clint," he stammered, "but wouldn't you agree that modern filmmaking has improved in other ways? special effects, inclusivity, storytelling techniques, things that weren't possible back in your day. He was grasping now, trying to steer the conversation in a different direction, but Eastwood wasn't biting. Technology changes, Clint admitted. But real talent? That's timeless. If Hollywood was actually better today, people wouldn't still be watching the movies we made 50 years ago. They'd be too busy watching the masterpieces of today. The crowd exploded again. This wasn't just an answer. It was a direct critique of the industry's obsession with style over substance. The host, realizing he was completely outmatched, gave a tight-lipped smile, but everyone in the room knew what had just happened. Clint Eastwood had turned a loaded question into a brutal takedown of Hollywood's current state. And as expected, social media wasted no time turning this moment into something much, much bigger. The moment the words left Clint Eastwood's mouth, the energy in the room shifted. The audience, initially unsure whether to laugh or stay neutral, erupted into applause. Some whistled, others cheered. Even those who weren't necessarily Eastwood fans couldn't deny the brilliance of his response. Meanwhile, the host sat there smiling awkwardly, visibly struggling to regain control of the conversation. He had expected to make Eastwood look outdated. Instead, he had just given him one of the most viral moments of his career. But the real storm started after the cameras stopped rolling. Within hours, clips of the exchange flooded social media. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere you looked, people were talking about it. The hashtag #TrackClintWasRight began trending, with thousands of users praising Eastwood's words. Fans called it a masterclass in shutting down Hollywood's arrogance, while others pointed out the irony. The very industry that tried to write Eastwood off was now getting a harsh reality check from him. And of course, the backlash followed. Some media outlets tried to spin the moment, claiming Eastwood's remarks were out of touch or dismissive of industry progress. But the problem: the public wasn't buying it. Comment sections were flooded with people defending him, pointing out how modern Hollywood constantly disrespects its legends while failing to produce films with the same lasting impact. Even celebrities joined the discussion. Some praised Eastwood for speaking his mind, while others, particularly those aligned with Hollywood's mainstream narrative, tried to downplay the moment. But no matter how they spun it, one thing was clear: Clint Eastwood had once again proven why he's one of the last true icons of the film industry. And as the clip continued racking up millions of views, one question became impossible to ignore. Was Clint right? Had Hollywood really lost its way? Well, what Eastwood said next took the conversation to an entirely new level, and this is where things get even more explosive. As the online debate raged on, Clint Eastwood's words started to hit deeper than just a viral moment. People weren't just laughing at the host's humiliation anymore. They were thinking. His response had exposed something many had felt for years, but were afraid to say out loud: Hollywood isn't what it used to be. And not in a good way. For decades, Hollywood was built on raw talent, powerful storytelling, and genuine artistic risk. The industry thrived on filmmakers who challenged conventions, actors who transformed roles into cultural phenomena, and studios that took chances on groundbreaking ideas. But today, it's a different game entirely. Instead of compelling narratives, we get cash-grab reboots, sequels no one asked for, and films built more for box office algorithms than human connection. It's not about what's good, it's about what sells. Eastwood's career has been proof of this shift. He built his legacy on character-driven films that prioritize depth over spectacle. Meanwhile, modern Hollywood has turned storytelling into a secondary concern. The focus is now on pushing narratives, checking diversity boxes, and ensuring every project aligns with corporate agendas rather than crafting something meaningful. And the results? Bloated budgets, forgettable movies, and an audience that is slowly checking out. Take a look at the classics, films like The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly, Unforgiven, Gran Torino. These weren't just movies. They were cultural events, shaping the way audiences saw heroism, morality, and even themselves. Compare that to today's blockbusters, where politics and spectacle take precedence over depth and character development. The contrast is staggering, and Eastwood knew it. That's why his response hit so hard, because it wasn't just about him. It was about what Hollywood has lost. And while some tried to dismiss his words as grumpy old man talk, the numbers tell a different story. Box office numbers have been plummeting, audiences are growing increasingly disconnected and streaming. Services are filled with forgettable content that no one remembers a month later. Clint Eastwood's legacy stands as proof that real cinema doesn't need to chase trends. It creates them. And when he was asked if Hollywood needed to evolve, his final comeback left everyone speechless. After the host's failed attempts to put Clint Eastwood on the spot, there was only one thing left to ask. But don't you think Hollywood needs to evolve? It was a desperate attempt to salvage the conversation, to push the narrative that the industry had improved beyond Eastwood's era. But Clint, calm as ever, didn't even hesitate. He leaned back, looked the host straight in the eyes, and delivered a response so brutally honest that it sent shockwaves across the studio. "Hollywood doesn't need to evolve," he said, pausing just long enough to let the words sink in. "People just need to start thinking for themselves again." The silence that followed was deafening. The host, who had spent the entire segment trying to steer the conversation toward Hollywood's progress, suddenly had nothing left to say. The audience, stunned, no applause, no laughter, just a collective realization that Eastwood had just exposed the real problem with modern Hollywood in a single sentence. And he wasn't wrong. Think about it. When was the last time you watched a movie that truly challenged you? One that didn't spoon-feed you its message, but instead let you draw your own conclusions. That's exactly what Eastwood was getting at. Hollywood's obsession with telling people what to think has replaced its ability to simply tell a good story. The internet exploded. Clips of that final line went viral, with fans calling it the ultimate mic drop. Comment sections flooded with people agreeing that Hollywood's downfall wasn't a lack of technology or money. It was a lack of authenticity. While Eastwood's movies trusted the audience to engage with the material and form their own opinions, modern Hollywood seemed determined to dictate what people should feel, believe, and accept. And just like that, Clint Eastwood, with a simple, cutting truth, left Hollywood scrambling for an answer. But the real damage had already been done. The public had spoken. And if Hollywood was paying attention, they would have realized they weren't evolving, they were alienating. The interview was over, but the fallout had only just begun. As the cameras cut to commercial, the host sat there, visibly shaken. He had walked into the conversation thinking he could control the narrative, but instead he had given Clint Eastwood the perfect stage to expose Hollywood's flaws. And now the internet was eating it up. Within hours, the exchange was everywhere. Social media platforms were flooded with clips of Eastwood's legendary response. Headlines popped up across entertainment sites. Clint Eastwood schools Hollywood in one sentence. Why Eastwood's words are making Hollywood nervous. And the interview that left a host speechless. Even mainstream news outlets, usually quick to dismiss anything critical of the industry, couldn't ignore the sheer impact of what had just happened. And then came the industry reactions. Some Hollywood insiders rushed to defend the host, calling Eastwood's remarks out of touch or stuck in the past. But the problem? The audience wasn't buying it. People weren't just praising Eastwood, they were questioning why modern Hollywood felt so threatened by his words. Why was it so controversial to say that storytelling should be about substance rather than agenda? Meanwhile, Eastwood, completely unfazed. While Hollywood scrambled to spin the situation, he simply went back to doing what he does best, making films on his terms. And that perhaps is what makes him so dangerous to the establishment. He doesn't need their validation. He doesn't need their approval. And he certainly doesn't need their permission to keep creating. The biggest irony? In trying to discredit Clint Eastwood, Hollywood had only proven him right. His words struck a nerve because they weren't just about him, they were about the entire industry's decline. And as more people wake up to that fact, one thing becomes crystal clear. Hollywood hasn't outgrown Clint Eastwood. It's just forgotten what real legends look like. So now the real question is, was Clint Eastwood right? Has Hollywood truly evolved, or has it lost touch with what made movies great in the first place? After everything we just saw, it's hard to deny that modern Hollywood is more focused on controlling narratives than telling great stories. And if Eastwood's movies are still being watched decades later, while today's films are forgotten in weeks, well, that says everything, doesn't it? But I want to hear from you. Do you think Hollywood is outgrowing legends like Eastwood, or is it Hollywood that's losing its way? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get this discussion going. And if you love content like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Trust me, there's more Hollywood drama coming your way, and you won't want to miss what's next. Click here to watch our next deep dive. You won't believe what we uncovered. See you there.